Dr. Greenspan, the worst case scenario being discussed right now is a double dip. The best case scenario is a prolonged period of slow growth in economies like the US, Europe, Japan. My question is that against that backdrop, if you have emerging economies like India and China growing at rates close to 8–10%, the prominence of these economies, do you see it shifting in favor of emerging economies over the years ahead?
Well, let's remember that we are all in the same global economy, that we interact, and essentially remember that there is a very substantial amount of demand for exports in emerging Asia, which are moved to the United States specifically, to Europe and other countries in the developed world. And if the developed world is not functioning properly, as indeed it is not, this extraordinary boom that we've seen in emerging Asia, in India, in China, Indonesia, and a long list of very successful economies, that can't go on because it is so dependent on the issue at this stage of exporting net to the United States. That is, the demand in the United States and elsewhere is a major factor in the success in East Asia. And until you get far more in the way, for example, in China, of domestic demand generated internally, and less on export markets, and the same pretty much in Eastern Asia. It's less so obviously in India, which is far less dependent on export markets than, for example, the rest of Asia. Strangely enough, India is doing better than anybody at this stage, in part because it is largely self-contained. And I'm not going to argue that the inflationary pressures and the large deficits and the very rapid growth in the money supply are not destabilizing over the long run. To date, India has managed to contain this problem, but it can't do so continuously. And I have very considerable concerns that if we think in terms that we're going to decouple, that's an illusion. We're all in the same global market. To the extent that we prosper, the rest of the world will prosper. And to the extent that the rest of the world prospers, we in the United States will prosper. And I think that's good. I think that we are finding that rising standards of living around the world require an ever-increasing specialization of labor, and that in turn requires an ever-increasing globalization, and that is all to the good. So I think we're having very significant problems at the moment, but the notion that somehow we are going to solve this by decoupling the issue of the developing world from the developed world is, I think, an illusion.
Just wanted a number from you. What percentage chance do you think there's going to be a double recession? Sorry, I just wanted a number of you, sir. What percentage chance do you think that there's going to be a